Dram watering tools have been the professional's choice for quality and durability for over 80 years. Use a Dram rain wand to create the softest shower of rain for your beds and containers, a 9-pattern revolver spray gun for a variety of uses, or a color storm sprinkler for a lush green lawn and garden. Dram, the professional's choice for lawn and garden. Available at a fine garden center near you. Visit us online at dramm.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm the editor of Fine Gardening magazine and Fine Gardening in general.
Carol is the editor-in-chief of Fine Gardening. I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the editorial director for the garden group. We're never going to get used to that. We're your besties in the garden realm of the Northeast and beyond. Let's just call it that. So Carol, I had a problem with today's topic.
Do you not like red? Is that the problem?
I don't like red. I don't have red and I don't have orange really in my garden. And pink I'm coming around to ish. But all right, in case you guys hadn't guessed, today's topic is favorite red flowered plants. And it was a stretch for me. What about I feel like you do have red plants in your garden.
I have a lot of red flowered plants, but I've talked about a lot of them before. I really do actually like red flowers, so yeah.
I mean, you're doing the hummingbirds a big service there because I mean, red flowers, hummingbirds, pollinator, it's all good. But yeah, there's just something about red. So well, you probably saw my plant list, but I extended it out. Like I needed to put some burgundy, dark red plants in there, some maybe pinkish red magenta plants. I pushed the boundary. I did.
Did you know that like in medieval times there weren't separate names for like pink and orange, like everything that was sort of in that general part of the color family was just called red. So
really?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably because they were creating like all of their paint and stuff from ox blood or something. So it was like lead and ox blood. So they just named it red. That's what it is. That's so funny. All right. Well, so I'm not off the boat yet, but okay, this is very funny though, but we'll have to, we'll get to this a bit later, but Peter has strong feelings about red in the garden as well.
Positive or negative? Spoiler? No, we'll wait and find out.
No spoiler, but let's start off on a positive note. And you had lots to choose from. What floated, like the first thing that topped on the top of your head, you were like, yes, that plant.
Okay, so I'm going to start with one that has red in the name. So
Okay.
but it does have pink in the flower, but it also has red in the flower. So I think I can get away with this. So it is red rouge dianthus, also called pinks, and that's dianthus red rouge. It's hardy from zones 4 to 9. This is a Walter's Gardens introduction, and so the plant that I have was one of the they send samples out to the garden writers, which is super appreciated. And so this was a garden writer sample. It's part of a series. So they're called the Single Ladies series, and they're all single dianthus pinks. And this one's red rouge, and the color is super intense. So it's like a hot pink base with splashes of like this brilliant, almost burgundy, but deep red. It's got pinked edges, like the little sort of fringy edges on the flowers. The flowers are bigger than most dianthus or pink flowers. It likes full sun to partial shade, really going more toward the full sun, though. It'll tolerate a little bit of shade, but it won't flower as well. Average to dry soil is very unfussy. It stays low. It's like 8 inches tall max, and it'll get 14 to 20 inches wide, and it just sort of gradually spreads out in this nice mat. The foliage is beautiful, sort of silvery blue foliage, which really, really makes that red pop. It's got a long bloom time. It starts in late spring. It goes all the way up to frost. I have had it sort of burn out when we'd had, very, very long dry spell in the middle of summer. The flowers stopped for a while. I sheared off the tops, and they started back up again in a few weeks. A little bit of water might help with that if you have a really long dry spell. They're low growing, so it's good for like at the edges of paths where you really don't want something big that's going to start leaning into the path. It's great in containers. It attracts butterflies and little pollinators. It has that lovely sort of cinnamon or spicy scent to it that a lot of the carnation family does. And it's related to carnations. And when you think about it, it kind of looks similar, but more of a single flower. Just a sweet, useful, lovely flower. And I think a nice shade of red.
Totally. I mean, it sounds beautiful. We're going to get in trouble, but I just wanted to start singing the Beyonce Single Lady song, because that's a great series name.
Yeah.
I will not do that so we don't get sued for copyright infringement. But I will say the one thing with dianthus is because in our old test garden, there was a few patches that were planted in a low-lying area. Dianthus does not like wet feet.
No.
Does not like wet feet. Rotted like there was like no tomorrow. Almost like overnight with a rainstorm. It was in a low-lying, and you went and picked it up, and it was basically sludge. So that's the one thing that dianthus will not permit is that
bad drainage.
Yeah, that overly wet spot. So, but something that I surprisingly, with super well-drained soil on a hill, I don't have a single dianthus in my garden, which is weird. I don't know why.
They're small, right? So it's like when you're at the nursery and you're looking to fill a big space, might not be the first thing you think of, but
but I loved your application for like along a pathway or something like that it's a really nice, well-behaved, almost ground cover like option after a while. And red. All right. I'll have to go onto the show notes and see the photos. In case you all aren't watching this on YouTube, you can also go to finegardening.com. If you want to get the plant list, click on that podcast tab and navigate to this episode, best or favorite red flowering plants. You can also see photos there too if you're not watching the video. And you've got this plugged into your earbuds whilst you are gardening. Something that's not tiny was the first plant that popped into my head in my garden, which was a peony. And it's hard to choose your favorites because peonies are, if push comes to shove, they are my favorite flowering perennial. And I went with Sword Dance, which is Peonia laticiflora Sword Dance, zones 4 to 9. And holy cow, it's red. I was like, no, I don't have any red plant. Yes, I have this peony and it is red. It's kind of on the magenta-y, pinky red side of things. All online, they described it as wine red, and that's a misnomer. That's like that's not accurate at all. It is not wine red. It doesn't look like Cabernet. It doesn't look like Pinot Noir. It's not red. It is maybe a dark rosé, if you will, but it's beautiful. It's a single blossom. They're quite large. They're almost 4 to 5 inches across. And the outer petals are all this kind of dark dark magenta-y red. And then in the inner boss of stamens, it actually is yellow, but has hints of that red outer petal through the stamens. The curly whorls that are kind of scattered throughout that boss of stamens has that, that echo of the outer petal color. It behaves like most peonies. It's a 36 inches tall, 36 inches wide, just a nice, almost shrub-like appearance. Great glossy green palmate leaves to it. The great thing about single bloomed peonies, and I have several different types in my garden, is that this one, sword dance, like those singles, generally don't need to be staked, don't need a peony ring around them. The blossoms just don't get that heavy. They're not those doubles and triples that are just, a pound a piece and pull down the plant. This one stays upright, and it's the only peony that I have that doesn't have a ring around it year after year and holds itself upright. I loved that they called this sword dance peony a Japanese style peony, and some people even call it an anemone peony, which I love because it reminds me, especially that center boss of curly, kind of tentacle-y boss of stamens. It looks like an underwater sea anemone. It's very cool. So I'll always remember now that it's a Japanese anemone style. But early June starts flowering. I'm kind of bummed because I'm about to go on a fine gardening trip, and mine are starting to crack color on those buds. So I'm super sad that I might actually miss the blooms on this peony this year, but it'll continue usually on for about 2 weeks or so, and then sporadic blooming afterwards every so often into July. But yeah, I love sword dance, so it made me a believer, I guess, in red flowers. We'll see.
Do you ever do the thing where you cut the blooms, I think just when they're beginning to break, and then put them in the fridge? Is that...
I've done that before. I went through a period of time where everybody and their mother were getting married in my friend group. So I had multiple bridal showers that were happening. And I had been out in Seattle doing an article with Catherine Mix, who owned a cut flower business outside of Seattle, actually Sequim, Washington. And she taught me that when it cracks color, cut it, you wrap it in slightly damp tissue paper, right? And you throw it in the refrigerator, and then they look terrible. They look dehydrated when you pull them out, but a fresh cut into some warm water and you preserve them. So thank you for the reminder. I'm going to do that.
This is the year to do it, right?
Yes, exactly. All right, Carol, I'm going to force your hand because I think I saw that you had a peony on your list too, didn't you?
I took it off the list because I thought you had a peony.
No.
And it was, to be fair, I let you have your peony because I know you actually grow it. And the peony that I have, I'll put the name and I'll put a photo in the show notes because I did have photos, but they were from the archives. I'd never grown it, but it's called America. And it is the one that, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting the name, Juniper Level Botanic Garden, Plant Delights. They say it's
Plant Delights,
their favorite red peonies.
Tony favorite.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Nice. Okay, so America and Sword Dance. If you want red peonies, those are two really good options. Yep. All right. Oh my gosh, guys, get ready. This is a last minute change. Carol Collins has pulled an audible on the podcast. So what do you got for me?
Okay, so I'll do, the next one I'm doing is Showy Lantern Red Vein Enkianthus, another one with red in the name. And that's Enkianthus campanulatus showy lantern, zones 5 to 8. It gets 6 to 10 feet tall, 4 to 6 feet wide. So it's like a nice small shrub that fit into your landscape. And showy lanterns is supposed to be a little narrower than the general species. And so if you have a spot, again, like near a path or something where you don't want something that splays out, this one will stay nice and narrow, like 4 to 6 feet wide. Full sun to partial shade. It does need some shade to look its best. This is really at its essence a woodland plant. It's native to Japan. It really likes moist soil. It likes well-drained soil. Most things, I think, like well-drained soil. And it grows best in acid soil. That's another thing. pH below 6. So that's important to know, especially if you don't live in a place that has naturally acid soil. We do.
We do.
We do. So it'll do just fine in New England soils, most New England soils. The other thing to know about is it blooms on old wood. So in general, it doesn't need pruning. If you're going to do any kind of pruning, just wait until after it flowers so you don't, cut away blooming wood before it gets a chance to open. This is interesting. I found this out through my research. A species named Campanulatus refers to the flower shape. That's, so refers to a bell-shaped flower like Campanula. And then the genus name, Enchanthus, is Greek. So people talk about botanical Latin. Some of it's Greek, and Enkios means pregnant, and anthos means flower. So the genus name means pregnant flower, which is so cute because the flowers really do. They kind of got that little baby bump on them.
Sure do. Sure do. Much like blueberries, like
Yes.
similar,
Yes.
little chubby little bellflower.
And showy lantern has a larger flower than the species. So it's sort of got a pink base and these beautiful cherry red veins. I came across this. I was shopping at Broken Arrow Nursery, and I swear they don't sponsor us, but I just happened to, they're 40 minutes away. They have good plants. I shop there. And I was also shopping, quite frankly, for plants with red flowers to take pictures of.
Nice.
So I the photos in the show notes are from Broken Arrow. So it's a young plant, the nursery plant, but it's about halfway to being full sized. The selection showy lantern was by Weston Nursery in Massachusetts, so almost kind of like a local selection. And selected for the larger flowers, narrow habit, and brilliant fall color. That's it's not just red in the late spring when the flowers are out. It has lovely foliage, holds through the season, and then in fall, it flushes deep red, and better red than the rest of the species will generally have. Fall color is pretty variable in Enchanthus, so this is one that you can count on for good fall color. And this is a plant that looks as good in person as it does in a catalog photo. That was my impression. I saw it and I was, okay, this one is making the list for the red plants or red flowers episode.
Beautiful. I actually, and we talked about this before we pressed record, I had that on my list before I dipped in and saw that you had it on your list. And I came across this plant because when Joanne Vieira was working at Tower Hill Botanic Garden, which is in Taunton, Massachusetts, or Brookline, Boylston. There we go. We'll get there. Boylston, Massachusetts. We'll get there. We'll name every Massachusetts town until we get there. She was always talking about that was one of her favorite plants, and I actually got to see it in person in full bloom a few years ago, and it is impressive. It is gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. And okay, we aren't an advertisement for Broken Arrow, and we do live close by to that nursery, but y'all can order from them too. They do online plant ordering at brokenarrow.com. So this is an unpaid advertisement for Broken Arrow Nursery because they do a great job and they have some really interesting high quality plants.
Yeah, things that other places don't have really, at least not in our area.
Exactly. Specialty plants. Everybody loves a specialty plant. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the last red flowering plant of all of my plants in my acre plus garden that is red flowering. And I had to be convinced to buy this plant, and I honestly did purchase it simply for the hummingbird factor. I wanted that, no fail hummingbird plant in the garden. And it is Major Wheeler trumpet honeysuckle, Lonicera sempervibrans or vibrans, Major Wheeler, and it's zones 4 to 8. And this is not a Japanese honeysuckle. So A, this is not an invasive honeysuckle. B, this isn't a honeysuckle that gets covered in powdery mildew the second that July 1st turns on the calendar. For many years, I avoided honeysuckle like the plague because I was convinced that every honeysuckle behaved like those ubiquitous invasive Japanese species honeysuckles. But this is a native honeysuckle that's native to eastern and southern United States, and it's spectacular. It is the most no muss, no fuss plant. I planted it in the corner of my vegetable garden. I have a fairly, very functional, but not very attractive fence that's all around my vegetable garden to keep the bunnies and the woodchucks and the deer out of it. And I grabbed this plant thinking, oh, it would be so great when I'm out in the veggie garden to have hummingbird friends visit me. So I popped it in the corner of the vegetable garden and did nothing to it. Literally did nothing to it, and it got rained when it needed water, and it has been there now for, I want to say, maybe 7 years. It's pretty impressive. It's only about 5 feet tall. That's about as tall as my fence is, 5.5 feet, and about 2 to 3 feet wide. Not super. It hasn't encompassed the entire fencing of the garden. If left to its own devices and it had a structure to which to climb to its potential, it can reach 6 to 10 feet tall and about 4 feet wide. But I only give it so much, and when it starts getting those Medusa vines, I kind of wrap them back around the fencing and let it go from there. It is semi-evergreen. It has these really beautiful, almost silver dollar-like leaves to it that have a glaucous blue color to it. The vines that kind of go around. The vines itself too kind of have a purple blush to it. But all right, I'm getting there. And it has red tubular flowers, kind of in a cluster. You usually get about 5 of those tubes of lipstick, if you will, an orangey red too, with a little kind of yellowish tip, star-like tip that's on the edge of each one of those tubes, and starts blooming here in zone 5B6. Let me think. Well, we're in June. It started well over a month ago. So I want to say the end of April, beginning of May is where it started blooming here. And this is going to bloom until fall. So it starts blooming and does most of its main blooming throughout the spring and the summer, which you can just imagine. Tubular red flower makes the hummingbirds go bananas. They have, a WrestleMania because the males don't like each other and they start dive bombing. It's awesome. It's so much fun to watch. And then once we get into fall and things start cooling down a little bit, you'll notice that the blooming does start to taper off a bit, but there's never not flowers on this vine, which is impressive. My one thing I will say, it is full sun, it is well-drained soil, that is what it wants. It's very unfussy as far as fertilizing or anything of that nature. It doesn't even get mulched, honestly, where it is, because it's right in the corner of this fence post. But this year, I had to trim out a lot of dead. Over time, some of the vines, the aged vines, probably that were about 5 or so years old, really bleached out, died back. It put on a ton of new growth, but I had to get in there and kind of weed out some of that dead. But other than that, I have done nothing to this plant, and it is beautiful. So much so that it inspired me to get 2 other cultivars in the past 2 years. One, I believe, was called Honeybell, which is yellow, has yellow flowers to it. And then I can't remember the name, but one that has an orangey coral color. So out in the vegetable garden, I can deal with reds and oranges. So it is doing its thing and it is super happy. I just love it. I really do. Okay, Carol. What's your next plant?
I love my annuals, and
Sure do.
and I think I've talked about this one before, but it's been a long time. So I'm gonna do it again. It's Strawberry Fields Gomphrena Strawberry Fields. It's an annual, so no zones on this one, and it is truly a favorite. And that's it might be my favorite red flowered plant of all time.
Period.
Yeah, period.
Wow.
It's so useful. I grow it every single year. It takes full sun. It'll take as much moisture as it can get, but it also does seem to tolerate drought and my crappy soil pretty well. I think of it like a bedding plant. So I start the seedlings 6 to 8 weeks ahead of the frost, and then I set them out about 10 to 12 inches apart, and they'll grow into a mound that's at least 12 inches wide. And, so they sort of grow together, and it can get up to 2 feet tall over the course of the summer. The bright red color of the flowers actually comes from the papery bracts that surround the true flowers, which are little tiny yellow flowers. So the effect is really, it's about the size of a small strawberry. And so it looks like a little red strawberry with the yellow seeds. And then the foliage, it has narrow leaves, and the foliage from a distance looks kind of silvery, so that, hot red stands out against the sort of cool silvery foliage. And the leaves are narrow, slightly hairy. I will put a photo of seedlings in the show notes so that you can see what the seedlings look like, because it will slightly reseed. And so sometimes you get a little bonus seedling somewhere in the vicinity of where a parent plant was. It looks great, from the time it starts flowering in sort of midsummer. If you get it in right around the last frost date, it's going to take about a month before it starts to flower, but it'll go right up until it gets hit by frost. And I found a photo of it like the day after the frost. So I'll put that in the show notes. And, at that point, the show is over. You might as well just pull it. Yeah, there's really nothing left. It kind of melts. But it makes a ton of seed, and the seed is very easy to collect, and it germinates quickly the following year. It doesn't need any kind of special treatment. So super, even if you don't usually do annuals, this is an annual worth trying. And you can, keep it going year after year just by collecting a handful of seed in the fall.
Carol, I want you to talk about crafting with this plant, because this is a beautiful dried flower.
Yes.
I know it's not technically a dried brack, right? So talk to me about that. How do you do it? What crafts do you do with them?
Okay. So it's a little bit like straw flower in that it dries same color, because those bracts have, just have that color in them. What I would do if I want to do this as a dried flower, cut the stems and then hang them upside down, because the stem will sort of droop if you're trying to dry it, standing upright the way it grows. So easy peasy, just tie the stems together, hang them upside down until it dries. A lot of people that do dried flowers like this will strip off the foliage because it doesn't look great when it dries. Really, all you want is the flower. So maybe before you hang it up, strip off the flowers, and then you can use it in dried arrangements. You can cut off the little flowers and, glue them onto things.
You made some very beautiful holiday ornaments, yes, if you will, using them, right?
I did that with straw flowers, but it's the same. Okay. You could absolutely do the same thing. I gave some dried to our coworker Diana when she was doing a bird wreath, because birds do like the seeds, and so do all kinds of little rodents and things like that. So yeah, it's actually kind of a good, even though it's not native, it's kind of a good wildlife plant too, because the seeds are, lots of things will eat those seeds.
I just love that, you're getting it lives beyond its root stock, because, a lot of people just think, annuals, they're not worth it. But if it gives you that beauty in the garden for that amount of time, and in a ways, it's an everlasting,
yes,
you can harvest it, use it in all of these other applications in the off season, if you will, and collect the seed to replant next year. That's That's a hard-working
It
annual.
is. And most Gonfrinas, like, I don't love the reds of most Gonfrinas. This is a real true red. It's just like a really nice, almost warm red instead of the cool sort of magenta-y reds, which is what most of the Gonfrinas are.
Yay, yay. All right. Well, I mean, if people aren't sold on that description, they're just never going to be sold on anything. Um, I am now moving into plants that I don't have in my garden that I have an affection for in other people's gardens, let's say, just because I just didn't have a lot to choose from. And I am going to pronounce this as Claude Schreid Martagon lily, just because, I just like the way that our Canadian friends up north say Claude instead of Claude. So Claude Schreid is a Martagon lily. It's Lilium Claude Schreid, and it's zones 3 to 9. And I started becoming aware of Martagon lilies. I do not have lilies in my own garden. I feel like the vole situation that I have would not be conducive to having lily bulbs. But Ed Lyon, who is out in Iowa for many, many years, introduced me to this whole class of lilies, the Martagon lilies, that are lilies that will tolerate shade. So they put on a very spectacular show in partial to some pretty significant shade of where I have seen these. The particular photo that you'll see in the show notes and in our YouTube video is of this particular species that is a deep burgundy red. It was in Curtis Steiner's garden, which was this very adorable urban pocket garden in deep shade just outside of Seattle. And there, it was alluring. I will say it was definitely alluring. It pulled me down the pathway to see what this plant was. And that's because it's a lily that gets 4 to 6 feet tall. I was looking eye to eye with the blooms. So let's say I'm 5'3", so it was around that 5-foot mark. And the lilies are smaller, so they're only about maybe 2.5 to 3 inches total. And they hang downward in this tiered fashion on these tall flower stalks. So you almost have this chandelier effect that's going on where they're blooming from the bottom first and all the way up to the top of this the chandelier of lily blooms. The Claude Schreid, like I said, is this deep dark burgundy. If you get really up close and you see those anthers that are an orangey color, each one of the petals has a bit of that orange dotting on it, but you need to have this lily up in your face in order to actually see that. I really like the fact that you could plant this as a serendipitous focal point plant all throughout the border. Just because it gets so tall doesn't mean that you need to push it to the back of a border. It doesn't have a whole ton of foliage. It has those kind of lily-like needly leaves that are in whorls all around the stems. It's not obtrusive at all. It's kind of diaphanous. You can see through it. And 3 to 9 is a really interesting zonal range for a lily. You're going to want to get these as bulbs and plant these as bulbs. They are hardy, so it's not, it's not in the gladiola or, the cannas. You can definitely, regardless of where you are in its zonal range, you just plant it once and then forget it. But I really love it. And I learned that Martagon lilies is kind of this catch-all phrase for hybrids of several different species of lilies, including Dalansonii, Hansonii, and the actual straight species Martagon. So anything in that range, and there's a few others too, one-offs, that can all be considered Martagon lilies, but they're grouped into based on their habit, their blooming behavior, and the downward facing of those tiny lily blossoms. So I'm not a lily fan. I'm not a red fan, but I really loved this Claude Shride Martagon lily, and I can see it showing up in my garden in the next couple of
Yeah,
years.
buyer beware. Mardian lilies are a bit addictive, as I understand it. Once you start getting them, you want more.
So it is a what do they call it? A gateway to lilies, a gateway to lilies. Alrighty, Carol, bring it on home with our final favorite red flowered plant.
Okay. So this is another one that I actually grow, but not for very long. It is red buckeye, otherwise known as Aesculus pavia. It is hardy from zones 4 to 8. It is a deciduous shrub or small tree, depending on its habit. Some of them sucker a little more. Some of them will make a strong single leader and form more like a tree shape. It gets 12 to 15 feet tall and wide. I feel like I have seen them bigger than that out in the world. It grows best in full sun to partial shade, moderately moist, well-drained soil. Moisture is especially, everything likes moist soil, but for this species, it really, if it gets too hot and dry, it just starts to look a little tired, especially the foliage. And generally for this plant, it's super happy in spring and early summer, but if you have a long, hot, dry summer, it will start to look a little bit tired by the end of summer. It's native to the eastern and southern U.S., as far west as Illinois and East Texas. So it has really quite a large range. I think some of the maps that I saw extended up into south central Canada, sort of between the Great Lakes, that kind of part of Canada. Late spring flowers, and they are an amazing true crimson red, just the perfect color that the hummingbirds love. And those flowers emerge right around the time that the hummingbirds start showing up for us, and that is mid to late May. It has compound foliage. It's a nice dark green, and the leaflets are arranged in a palmate shape. And they have prominent ribs, and they're a little tiny bit glossy. So that adds some extra interest too. And some of the stems and petioles pick up that red color that's in the flowers. We actually saw this plant at the New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill around Memorial Day last year when we were there. And at that time, I had just bought one of these little baby red buckeye, and I had planted it out by the road, and the deer immediately ate all the flower buds off it. I got no flowers that first year. So what I did, this is something to keep in mind if you plant something and realize right away that it is in the wrong place. That's the best time to move a plant. It's the first season. So I did that. I waited until the end of the summer, and I moved it off the deer path.
Nice. That's good. We brought it in a little closer for a little more protection.
Yes, and the deer left it alone. And I did get flowers this year, so that's good. Nice. My 2-year-old plant is a little bit taller than me, so it's about 6 feet tall. And we did have photos of a nice full-size specimen in the archives, and so I dropped a few of those in the show notes so you can see the potential, and then sort of what I see when I look at my little scraggly Charlie Brown red buckeye.
It'll get there someday. It'll get there.
And what I love about it is a very unusual color for a spring flowering tree. And the bigger
that's a great point. Yeah. Like red flowers, for the most part, we've been talking about, this is summer. This is the color of summer.
It is. Yeah, less common with spring flowers. I don't know, pink, yellow.
Pastels.
Yeah, pastels. Yeah. So nice, strong color. And the bigger it gets, the more hummingbirds it'll feed. So that's That's all the selling point I need. But all parts of this plant are poisonous. So like, don't anybody think that this has edible flowers. It does not. Poisonous, bad. I don't know how the deer that ate all my flowers survived, but maybe it didn't. Maybe that's why it's never gotten eaten again. I don't know.
Maybe not. Indigestion,
Right.
at least a horrible case of indigestion. Wow. That is, I remember the specimen at Tower Hill, we were standing under.
Yes.
Like that's how large it was. And the flowers were above our heads.
Yes. And it was under the canopy, so it was a little more sparse. The one that, the mature one in the show notes, out by itself, it's very full. So the habit sort of depends how much light it gets, I think.
Beautiful. I worked with a nurseryman years and years ago too, who had recommended this aesculus as a good street tree because it's got a very polite habit. It doesn't have aerial roots that kind of push up sidewalks or driveways or anything like that. And I guess it's very tolerant of a lot of urban pollution too. So just throwing that out there. I don't have experience with that, but I have noticed that around our state, here, there, and everywhere now, you will see that it is a tree that's becoming popular in traffic circles and things like that. I think for just that reason, that it does well in those conditions.
Yeah, and
not all trees do.
I did have it, like that was where it was for me. It's like right out by the street, but has too much deer traffic on our street.
It's a different kind of pollution there. Oh man. All right, well, I'm going to finish off with a plant that is on my property, but I feel like it's not actually in my garden. Like it seeds in occasionally, but and that's red trillium. So Trillium erectum. This is zones 3 to 7. This is a beautiful, dare I say, my favorite, probably spring native. I love the trilliums. I just find them to be absolutely beautiful spring ephemerals. This is not a plant that's going to hang out for the entire year, but in spring, there's just something so hopeful about when you see them popping out. And as you were just saying about the aesculus, there is a really interesting, dynamic to see a red flower in spring when it's just a parade of pastels. So this trillium has, I guess there are 3 different leaves. It kind of looks like an oversized clover. I guess that's how I would describe the foliage, and they're arranged all the way opposite all the way around the stem. And then you get this beautiful, deep, dark red 3-petaled, starish like shaped flower on each one of those plants. And it's quite bold. The plant is quite bold, and the flower, because you get sucked in by that bold foliage, is very bold as well. That dynamic of red on green. And it's a very bright Kelly green as well. As I said, this is an eastern native, or actually like eastern half of the country native, and likes to be in a sunny spot in spring, but a shady spot as we march towards summer before it completely disappears. The ephemeral nature disappears. So great understory plant. If you were to incorporate this into a landscape design or into your garden borders, for me, it's on the native edges of my property, but you would want to put it as, underneath a tree or in a shadier spot underneath some large shrubs where before they leaf out, you get a totally amazing, burst of sunshine that makes that plant fill out, bloom nicely. And then once it leaves out, you're going to get that deep, dark shade. So you'll be able to make sure it gets its proper conditions. It likes moist, well-drained soil, humus rich, a little bit on the acidic side, all the things that, an Eastern native would really appreciate in conditions. I have learned that, now I've never smelled this, but apparently if you shove your nose into a Trillium erectum, they're stinky, quite stinky. In fact, spoiled raw meat was what I had heard. And the reason for that is that to attract carrion flies and other pollinators who are very attracted to that rotten meat smell. Like, don't be alarmed. Like, honestly, there is a huge colony, right? As I'm looking out my window, I've never smelled raw meat from even a close-up distance, but I guess once you shove your nose in it, or the flies get very attracted to that, and that pollinates the trillium. It puts on a fruit afterwards that then feeds small mammals and birds as well. Over time, this plant will form thick colonies. It's not truly rhizomatic, is my understanding, but it does kind of, form these plantlets that eventually mass out into this, very sizable clump. And it's super attractive. The peak of my, now red flowers, but I'm going to talk about the peak of my spring this year was that occasionally and rarely you will see a white variant of red trillium, which is very weird because when you go to label it, you're like red trillium and everybody sees this photo and they're like, what? But it will have this naturally occurring, on occasion, white variant that is almost a buttery yellow, quite frankly, not really white, with a red boss in the center of it. So that was interesting. I got to see one of those this year in one of the native colonies, and I was like, hooray. But yeah, big fan of this plant. I love that it's native. I love that it feeds early pollinators in the area, and I can definitely see this making its way into my beds eventually. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to give us his true feelings about red flowers.
Good morning, dear listeners. It's Peter here with another gentle ramble through the hedgerows and herbaceous borders of our beloved gardens. Now, I realise what I'm about to say may scandalise some of you, particularly those with a penchant for the bold and the brash, but I must confess, I've never been able to abide red flowers in the garden. There, I've said it. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Roses are red, violets are blue, and all that poetic claptrap. But I've always found red blooms to be rather shouty, if I may be so frank. They barge into the border as if they own the place, strutting about as though the entire garden were their stage. No sense of restraint, no inclination to harmonise with their neighbours. Give me the soft blush of a pale pink penstemon, or the wistful droop of a dusky mauve foxglove any day. You see, red is just too eager to impress. It lacks subtlety. It clashes with the quiet dignity of an English lavender hedge or the creamy peach petals of a well-behaved David Austin rose. I once filled into a window box with some red ivy geraniums, an experiment in broadening my horizons, I told myself. The effect was immediate and appalling. It looked like the poor box had come down with a fever. So for those of you who revel in crimson blooms, do carry on. Gardens, after all, should reflect their gardeners. But as for me, I'll be here with my soft whites, my gentle blues, and my modest, retiring greens, safe in a garden that doesn't shout, but whispers, in a slight Bedfordshire accent.
Oh, looks like Peter is not a fan of red flowers either, Carol.
Why am I the only? I'm not the only one. I know there are listeners that like red flowers too.
No, it's true. And nursery rhymes too. I mean, Peter brought it up. Roses are red. We all grew up on that. I mean, true love is red, just not in my garden. All right, let's see if our expert likes red flowers. Hopefully, yes.
Hi, I'm Erin Shannon of the Impatient Gardener blog and YouTube channel and contributing author to Fine Gardening, and I like my red flowers small and plentiful. My first red-flowered pick is one that works with its stunning foliage to be guaranteed to stop you in your tracks in the garden. It's Salvia elegans Golden Delicious, a triple threat pineapple sage that is a tender perennial in most zones and truly hardy in zones 8 to 10. It's remarkable for its chartreuse to yellow foliage that creates a mound that is about 2 to 3 feet tall, but it sometimes gets up to 4 feet if it's growing in the ground. It's lovely for its pineapple scent, but late in the season, usually around September, it rewards truly patient gardeners and takes the whole show over the top with scarlet tubular flowers that stand out against the still very yellow foliage. It's a really tough plant, and although it would prefer full sun and evenly moist soil, it can be pushed into even light shade and can handle poor soil too. Is there any more iconic red flower than the poppy? Even though their flowers can be quite bold in color, I just feel that a few red poppies can work in any garden. I'm cheating a little bit on this one by not picking just one, but some poppies grow better than others in certain gardens. I'm a big fan of breadseed poppies, that's Papaver somniferum, because they're just a cinch to grow for me. Giant Red is a really good seed variety, but there are many others out there, and of course they're quite promiscuous and they like to mix and mingle. So in time, if you're growing other varieties of poppies in your garden, you can get some really interesting reds of your garden's own creation. I once grew this frilly double with jagged edge petals that kind of popped up out of nowhere, and it was a really fun addition and surprise in the garden. One of the more classic red poppies is Papaver commutatum. This is the Caucasian scarlet poppy and the variety Ladybird. This has 4 truly red petals, and each one has a perfectly black dot that befits its name. This is another annual poppy native to Turkey and Eastern Europe. Now, there are various ways to grow these, but direct seeding is undoubtedly the easiest way, although you will be thinning them if it works well. Once you have them established in your garden, they'll usually take care of the reseeding for you as long as you aren't a heavy mulcher and you don't accidentally weed them out. I think the first time I saw a ladybird poppy in a garden was actually at Chanticleer, where they were growing amongst a lot of blue foliage plants near the pool there. And with that blue foliage, you wouldn't think of that as being such a great combination, although since poppies do have sort of bluish foliage anyway, I guess it's nature's way of telling us what works. They just stood out in this area, and they were so charming, and you could spot them from across the garden. It was really a beautiful little stand of flowers. And who doesn't love a little suggestion of the tropics in their garden? Crocosmia offers a little bit of that. And although there are many interesting varieties, Lucifer, which happens to be the most widely available, is probably the best red of the bunch, in my opinion, and tends to be a bit hardier than some others. It grows 3 to 4 feet tall and has these stroppy sword-like leaves that in and of themselves are a nice accent in the garden. But then these dark arching stems rise above and through the foliage and hold tubular flowers in a line. That makes it a favorite of hummingbirds, but it's also really good as a cut flower. Probably one of the most impressive stands of Crocosmia that I've ever seen was growing at the entrance of a garden in Mackinac Island, which is, if you know Mackinac Island, perhaps not the place you might expect to see Crocosmia growing. But in an island that tends to be full of a lot of annuals and sort of a confectionery look to it, this red Crocosmia at this gate just stood out along a whole row of beautiful gardens. It's a South African native, so it's no surprise that it likes full sun and good drainage. And it's said to be hardy in zones 5 to 9, but I'll admit that it's been a struggle to grow well as a perennial in my zone 5B, 6A garden. Fortunately, it is easy to grow from corms, so I start those early in pots inside, and then I transplant those out to the garden, which gives it enough of a jump start to actually get flowering and do its thing in summer. The plants also these days seem to be readily available in garden centers as well, so there's really no excuse not to give this one a try.
Well, Carol, I mean, we've had some people who like red flowers, some people who don't on the podcast, but we all got through and we found our favorites. And I think it's fair to say that nobody talked about a rose.
No, it seemed too obvious. But
I like that. It seemed too obvious. If you want a podcast about plants that is not obvious, this is it, baby. This is it right here.
That's one way of putting it.